Now.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for a fireside chat. Maybe it's very aptly titled Fireside because it's also feisty and a very important, a pertinent topic for all of us to look forward to. Most importantly, when we say smart beyond 2021, our data future. Now, let me quickly introduce our set of speakers. In fact, the ones who are joining us are nothing short of being thought leaders. We all know of them, their work, we all know about them. So it's very interesting that they've joined us this evening to share their insights. In fact, this entire session is being spearheaded by Mr. Rajiv Arora, Global Head of IT Global Hub, Siemens Limited, and he is someone who's a seasoned IT professional, and he's the one who's in charge of extracting as many perspectives as possible from fellow speakers. Our panelists include Mr. Arpit Agarwal, Vice President, Analytics and Data Science, Khatabook, Mr. Kamal Kumar, Head Analytics, Tata Unistore Limited, Mr. Chandra Shekhar Prasad, who's the Chief Data Officer, Mahindra First Choice Wheels Limited, Mr. Deepak Oram, Head MarTech and Automation, HDFC Bank, Mr. Nitin Dhavate, Country Data Privacy Head, India, South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, Novartis, Mr. Shubhashish, Dubey, Member Executive Committee and Chief Data Officer, AXA, and Mr. Kiran Samudrala, Chief Data Analytics Officer with Equifax. So on that note, I'm going to quickly urge all our members of the audience to also share your questions so that Mr. Rajiv, our session moderator, will be more than glad to take them towards the end of the session. Please note this is our final session for the panel, so let's make the most of it. And within the next couple of seconds, we'll get our panelists on board and get the session started. Here we go.
Live now.
Good evening to you all. I'm Rajiv Arora, and I'm really privileged and humbled to moderate a panel discussion on smart data, the future of beyond 2021, with an esteemed panel, I would say esteemed diverse panel, coming from the e-commerce to financial sector to pharma sector, what we have in this. And we are going to discuss that how the future would be redefined with data, which we have been seeing for last few years. All of you do know that the GDP of India is about $2.7 trillion. But you know the GDP of the 5 companies called FANG, Facebook, Alphabet, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. It's $7.8 trillion, the market cap. And all these companies are data companies. See the value of data, which is almost 3 times the GDP of a country like India. We all are aspiring to be $5 trillion over the next 5 years, by 2025. By then, the market cap of these 5 companies, maybe I know how many $1 trillion. So just see the data is the new currency, is the new oil, which would define how we should do business. We collect data in almost every sector, could be manufacturing, could be e-commerce, could be financial sector, or could be even the pharma sector, or any more sectors what you can talk about. But only 80% of data, what we really see, is actually being used for static reportings. Only 20% of the data is actually being used for decision making. What is defining the new active intelligence for all the CXOs? I was just going through a report where they said that the data is going to define, or would really actually define, the economic growth of the countries. PwC is saying it will help us increase merger and acquisition based on data points. There'll be more increased regulations coming across because of data privacy, as we all are seeing in the media what is happening to data privacy. Right now, we capture about 463 exabytes of data. I don't know. I can't count on my any calculator or any Excel sheet that how many bytes of data we would have in next 4 years time frame. And we all would aspire to have a best of the breed IT solutions that can help us take our issue next level. So what is data? So data is the one which is redefining the strategy, which is getting a seat in the boardrooms to define the strategy, the acquisitions, the merger, the growth, the approach for the next few years. So with the esteemed panel, what we have in this call, we were discussing few themes. The first theme we'll focus around is around data culture, because this requires a different mindset of the people to leverage data for also decision making. So let me first invite Shubhashish, who's actually working with EXA, insurance company. And we all know very well how insurance is actually using data for all of us. So let me ask Shubhashish, where do you see the culture of data in your organization or in the financial sector? And how it is embedded into your grassroots levels? Over to you, Shubhashish.
Thank you, Rajiv. I think you set the context pretty well in terms of letting us know what kind of data overload that we are going through, in the current world, basically. And the topic of this panel is also pretty apt in terms of how we become, future data ready, so to say. And the question that you asked is a pretty apt one as well, because when we are talking about future and becoming ready to handle smart data of future, I think what we really need to focus on in how we change the culture associated with our ability to handle that data. And by this data culture, I believe, I have two understanding, how we can prepare the organization to handle this data, how we can prepare the organization culture, as well as how we can prepare people within these organizations to deliver on some of these smart data future topics that we are talking about. And, one of the first things from an organization point of view that comes to my mind is how is a blueprint within an organization which is aspiring to become a data-driven organization is prepared. Often I have seen, based on my experience, that companies, specifically companies which are non-data native organization, organization like us, for example, who have been traditionally been focusing on a lot of manual processing, manual documentation, insurance companies, and when you sign an insurance contract, there are tons of and heaps of paper associated with those contracts. If an organization like us or an industry like us are trying to become data-driven, we really need to put forth a blueprint of what exactly the data-driven organization look like. That, I believe, becomes the first step when it comes to defining the culture of our organization. The second, from a people perspective, is how we empower people. In fact, not just empower people, but how we give them real power by putting them in charge of handling data. And culturally, it is easier said than done because there are a lot of things that we need to overcome in terms of processes, in terms of mindsets, in terms of capabilities and things like that. While we empower people, without empowering that people, I don't think that culturally we will be ready to handle the smart data future. Especially given one thing which you said, that we are actually going to handle a lot of real-time data. As in, unless until we are empowered from a decision-making perspective and capable of handling that data, it's not possible. And which is a segue to my last point, which is the capability of our people to handle data. It is sometimes few people think that ability to handle data resides only with few people or few departments within an organization, which is, let's say the CIO team, the technology team, maybe the data teams, maybe the data privacy teams. But no, it is not. Ultimately, the responsibility of and the ability to handle data resides with the entire organization. And we need to make them capable to be able to do so. And those are on the topics that I just highlighted, 3-4 topics on data-driven organizations blueprint, or empowering people, or making them capable of being able to handle data, is what we are working on at an organization level within AXA in a very specific manner. There are lots and lots of awareness programs which are going on. There are lots and lots of training programs which are going on, so on and so forth. We are walking the talk right at the grassroots level, where the data entry is happening, where the customer interaction is happening, to the level wherein there are data scientists and AI professionals who are working on those. So those three is what for me are the defining elements, from a data culture point of view.
Thanks, Shubhashish. I know they are really valid points, and there's something what I think so most of the companies are doing. But let's hear from Chandra now, who's the Chief Digital Data Officer for Mahindra First Choice of Wheels Limited. I know Mahindra is launching SUV after SUV, cars after cars. They also have the value cars of the first choice also. And knowing Anand Mahindra, he's a man who of data. So what is that he is driving a culture in his organization to launch so many cars, because he has a data points. Without data points, he can't launch so many cars. So Chandra, if you can really throw some light from a Mahindra Group point of view to us.
Thanks for this question to me. First thing is definitely we talk of data culture. I mean, when I joined this company, first, I was asked to prepare a data strategy for near future. I mean, near future, it means 3 to 5 years. And the first point I mentioned was data culture. And that data culture, it not only belongs to people and the process, but also belongs to outcome. So one is, at one end, you have data which is not being properly collected. 2, make it usable. 3, make it self-serving. Now there is one more angle to it. There are people who can deliver those results. I mean, that could be data scientists, data engineers, or maybe analysts, by the way. But there are people who can actually do themselves. For example, product managers, or maybe some technology people. And then there is something, apart from this, there is something called data security. We have seen cases where, like data is not treated like an asset. Even if whatever we talk about, that data is a new oil, data is a new energy stuff, but on the ground reality, you will feel that at some point in time, data is not even treated as per security norms. So how you can govern those data points, how to make them safe for the organization. For example, what we did, for example, think of technology people. Why are technology people should have access to entire database? I mean, how can we restrict those access to very limited people? Or maybe, for example, putting across hierarchies, mapping the roles correctly to which table, not only table, but also related to a particular column. What information you should be able to see, depending upon not only the hierarchy, but the role actually you are performing or the responsibilities you are delivering. We looked into all the aspects, from capturing the data to driving value to making it useful. I mean, it also tells about what other changes you can bring, because I was the first people and I had to show the change. I mean, we are the ones who have the responsibility to bring in the new changes in the system, existing system, whatever, be it Mahindra or any other company. We all people here have just one single responsibility, which is to drive the change and bring out those results which are expected out of us. So, I mean, there is one set of inputs and there is one set of outputs, I mean, which are expectations. And to marry those, we are building those data cultures where, there are people, there are systems, there are processes, there are infrastructure, how we can build them and how we can build or bring in those results.
Thanks, Chandra. I thought that's really a good point you brought, that data is still owned by people and process, but outcome is the one thing. And that is very visible that how Mahindra, I think so. Something my guesswork is using data points to transform his company to more of a data-driven company. But the next question comes to us, that how do we really use this data responsibly? Because the data is being used by one of us, by our own people, by us. How can we leverage those algorithms coming from AI or machine learning to make it effective? So let me bring Nitin, who comes from Novartis. Is that right, Nitin? Sorry for that. Novartis. He's the
Absolutely.
country data privacy head for India, South Asia, Africa for Novartis. So Nitin, I know this would be your topic, that how would you drive the responsibility, the accountability of using data, leveraging one of those niche technologies of AI or machine learning to responsibly decide the outcomes. With that, go to you, Nitin.
Yeah, thanks, Rajiv. I think one is the context that you said, Rajiv, in terms of the data that is getting collected from individuals. A lot of that will be personal data, right? And I'll try to answer this question from a data privacy perspective to a certain extent, at least. So if you look at the gold standard when it comes to data privacy regulation, it is the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR for short. Primarily effective in the EU, the European Union, but has some kind of extraterritorial aspects as well. But if you look at the two key objectives of GDPR, right? One is obviously it is there to protect the privacy rights of individuals. At the same time, it also aims to have free movement of data, right? So free movement of data between the individuals whose data is getting collected, between the corporates, right? It may be healthcare companies or it may be other companies, and the government to a good extent as well, right? Now, this free movement of data doesn't necessarily mean that we indiscriminately share or use data. And this is where this responsible use of data, responsible and accountable use of data comes into picture. In fact, accountability is one of the key principles of GDPR and a lot of the privacy regulations which are there in vogue around the world as well. So if you really look at it from an individual's perspective, as you rightly pointed out, I think Shubhashish also pointed this out there, right? A lot of data is generated by the individual, right? Be it when they avail healthcare services or they are doing some kind of online transactions, be it banking, e-commerce. Users use a lot of wearables these days, so a lot of that data gets generated, right? What the users expect is that this data is used responsibly by the corporates, right? And we'll talk about how corporates are supposed to use this data responsibly and with accountability. But from an user perspective, they expect that this data is used responsibly. If you come to the corporate side of things, the main aim of the corporates would be to monetize this data, to make innovative use of this data, right? And that's where these algorithms of AI, ML, deep learning come into picture. So if you really look at it, one of the key requirements when it comes to governance around AI or use of AI and its variants, right, like ML or deep learning, is that it should be human-centered, right? We would want to have AI implemented keeping humans in mind. If you look at patients, because I come from the healthcare sector, if you look at patients, if there are clinical trials getting designed, they should be revolving around the patient as such. They should be designed keeping in mind patients as such. There are these patient support programs. Again, they should be designed with keeping the humans in mind, right? And since there's a lot of sensitive information involved when it comes to healthcare, again, the goal is to make sure that the data is used for the right reasons, for fairly, for fair users. The purposes have to be defined in advance and it has to be used for those purposes alone, right? So the human-centered AI as such is one of the key aspects when it comes to responsible use of data. As AI makes progresses within the organizations, a lot of countries are trying to ensure that there is enough governance around the use of such technologies. One of the key approaches which is being looked at, right, is what we call as a risk-based approach, depending on the use case for that AI, depending on the risk to the individuals whose data is getting processed, the different levels of controls need to be put in place as well, right? One such example of a regulation which is coming up is in, again, the European Union. where they have come up with a regulation which asks for governance around the use of such AI technologies, and it's primarily a risk-based approach, right? So I think these are some of the aspects which need to be taken into account when we want to ensure that corporates, and in a lot of cases governments, also use data responsibly and are accountable for the use of such data. I think the whole concept of using consent or hiding behind the concept of consent for use of personal data is actually kind of going out of vogue, I would say. The regulations will focus more on ensuring that corporates and governments are accountable for the use of data, and that's the direction we are going in. And that's how I see the future of data as well, Rajiv. Thank you.
Thanks, Nitin. I know in the pharma sector, that's very critical, but also on the other side, this pandemic had actually changed the entire shopping thing in the world. It's more like an e-commerce. And there also, a lot of private data is there, personal data is there, you give your credit cards. So let me invite Kamal Kumar, who is the Vice President for Data Analytics and Science for Tata Unistore, for Tata Unistore. So Kamal, in the e-commerce sector, how do you feel that you as Tata Unistores are actually using the data more responsibly? What kind of a best practice you share with all of us?
Thanks, Rajiv. I think that's an excellent question and a really deep one. So I think all the basic things like PII data not being visible to anyone in the organization, having a encryption for most of the data, talking in terms of customer hashes and all the API protocols working on customer hashes, all those things are in place. And we work very closely with different stakeholders and with the larger group, companies as well, to ensure that data is, especially on individuals, etc., is being guarded and is not being exposed wherever there is no need. But having said that, we have taken within this firm, we have taken a customer forward use of data. So for example, there might be a lot of users of data that don't breach any regulations as such or are not in contradiction to legal laws, but still are not very customer forward. So for example, all of us get a lot of push notifications from e-commerce firms and other technology companies. So a user who goes and adds something to the cart or browses a few PDPs, he or she will get a lot of notifications. So is this use of data fair to the user? Now there is no law that says that you can't send a notification to a user basis what he or she has done. But we know that users don't like it, and it is very much out there in the data that after a notification, there is an uptick in the uninstall rate. But again, there is a trade-off in which if you send less notifications, then your GMV gets affected. How do you balance between these things? So we said that we'll only allow use of data wherever it helps our consumer community, and we'll redefine what customer communication means to us. So if the data is being used to directly impact profit or revenue of a firm, maybe we don't want to do it at the cost of customer experience. So for us, customer experience takes precedence over anything else. And irrespective of whatever is there in legal or regulatory terminology, we'll of course 100% comply with that. But we'll go beyond that so that our customers are not hassled uselessly. So of late, we built a behavioral science model to see what customers want to interact with our platform, what kind of communications they want, at what frequency, and individuals are really different. Someone might want to get communication after 10 or during the evening hours. Someone wants to get communication after they have finished a run. And thanks to technology, we can do all this one-on-one personalization. So we have worked a lot in that domain and ensured that whatever use of data we do is customer forward, and we have filed patents for it. And we have been getting really positive response from the user community. We are seeing tenfold increase in our click-through rate and conversion rate. So earlier, through the out-of-the-box technologies, if the same number of visits were being driven from 10 notifications, now we are able to do it just from one notification. So it's still I think early stages, but we are more and more thinking in terms of how can we be more customer forward and use data in that aspect.
Thanks, Kamal, for sharing those insights, but still Amazon is the leader in the world. And I can only say that I know many of you would be receiving multiple notifications from multiple e-commerce sites. You use it once, and plus, which is something which is annoying, coming from the hardcore industry of the banking sector. I've seen that no matter you say tick in the box or not tick in the box, don't save my cards or details, you still save it. That something is still the data privacy is compromised. But let's see. Let's come back to Deepak.
Point, one is I think Nitin and Kamal brought about fantastic points in responsible use of data. There is one element, because you said responsible AI use as well, artificial intelligence, which is coming in. I'd like to bring in one element of fairness in this. How fair our algorithms are going to be in future, and there is some real use cases wherein the fairness is getting questioned of our algorithms. We might actually, so for example, let's say I'm analyzing resumes using AI technology of selecting candidates. Personal data would be, let's say, a man or a woman. Even if I delete that to allow for fairness from an algorithm perspective, should I take care of, let's say, a AI algorithm choosing, because AI typically learns itself as well, right? A machine learning learns itself as well. How can I avoid an algorithm choosing only candidates who like playing football? And in a way, create, algorithm which is not so fair. Those are certain points which are emerging from a responsible use of data and AI as well, that from a data science community, we spoke about from a business community, Kamal spoke about from a data privacy perspective, Nitin spoke about, but from a data science and that community, that fairness is becoming very, very important topic from a responsible use of AI as well.
And Shubhashish, you brought a very valid point. That's why I very coolly left that topic, that even if you don't save my card detail, it still saves it out. So that's where, let me pull our friend from HDFC, Deepak. Deepak, HDFC is one of the large private bank in the country, doing a great results, awesome things. How are you as a bank, which was a brick model, I know with Aditya Puri and Deepak Pari driving it out, how are you guys transforming to be more data-driven things? How are you being more fair to the customers in getting the data being used responsibly, keeping in mind the data privacy for an individual who has an account with you or not an account with you?
So you rightly pointed out that HDFC Bank started as a retail bank, very branch-oriented, service-oriented, of course. Customer walks into a branch, you have to treat them well and take care of their needs, right? What we realize is that while that is good, being available at every street corner and every major, at least a major city, is good for customers, but that was reactive. So you walk in, then I think what to do with you, maybe ask you a couple of questions, and sir, how may I help you? What we have now realized is that the customer, at least in a bank, leaves such a big footprint in terms of their financial well-being, health, needs, aspirations, that you can leverage this to give a more proactive service, even in a branch. Right? So what we have now embarked upon is that whether you are going to a branch, whether you're coming to our website, whether you're coming to our app, whether you're going to even Facebook, for example, we are trying to ensure we have your financial needs at the center. Of course, we're trying to cajole you into buying a product. Typically, why would you spend money on Facebook if there is no revenue aspect of it, right? But at the same time, it is trying to figure out whether you want to travel tomorrow, you want to buy a car in the next 6 months, and we're trying to figure out how can I serve that need. Of course, the choice is yours. No one is forcing you. We just try to be more relevant to you, whether you walk into a branch or whether you are on a digital platform. This is one aspect of trying to become data-driven, which is taking your customer footprint very seriously and trying to put it out there in terms of execution. And I'm part of the marketing team, right? So I take the huge sets of data, churn it together, and my job is also to execute. I'm not only finding insights, I'm taking the data and putting it out there for the customer to give immediate feedback, which is nothing but a click. So when we apply data science versus when we just apply simple segmentation, the metric, which is the click-through rate, can sometimes be 5 to 8 times higher than if you don't apply data science, only segmentation. That's the power of data, right? You are able to enthuse a customer almost 8 times more than you would have if you just simply applied male, female, or some segmentation or age segmentation. So that is what tells you is the power of data, and we see it day to day in our execution. That's part number one. It's all centered around service and customer delight. Part two of this, of what you said is data driven, is the organization's culture itself or way of operating has to be data driven, right? For example, if I give a guy a scorecard in the CRM in branch, but he has a habit of just willy-nilly walking around and talking to customers without referring to that insight and using that as a layer to service better, nothing's going to happen on the ground really, right? You can't impact anything. So this is what I like to call data-driven operating model. Data is there, data is the new oil, data is very valuable, it works, we all know it. But this behavior change of the staff, the employees, to take data and leverage it, again, with the customer at the center. Because we serve the customer better, we are all profit-making organizations, but we all know that if you serve your customers better, they will come back for more. It's the easiest recipe for profit that is out there, right? So this inculcating this value within our employees, whether it's a marketeer trying to make an ad, whether it's a salesperson coming to your house to pick up a document, or it's a person sitting in the branch. That appreciation of data and the value you can generate for a customer, of course, that will in turn come back and give you your appraisal, in a big way. You will make your commissions in a big way because you'll be selling way more effectively. So that culture and data-driven operating model is something that we are very keen to build within ourselves. And if we build that, I think, sir, what you said, Rajiv, is ki profit acha hai, that profit will only become bigger. So it's a lever to give back to our shareholders, our stockholders, whoever is out there who expects this from us. So data is really at the center.
Thanks, Deepak. And I really made a good point you made, Sada. And that's why, if you recall, at the beginning, I said that the GDP of India is $2.7 trillion. And the market cap of those five companies is 7.7 or 7. It's almost 2 to 3 times of the India's GDP. So basically they are using the data to be much more profitable, much more these things. I know our banks are actually having a lot of data, but the culture, what you really brought up, a very good point. I know Shubhashish brought it, Chandra, but the culture is a major part. How do we use the data? Because still some banks calls you, sir, credit card lelo. You never know that you only have 2 credit cards with the same bank already having in the bank. So we don't have that we don't use it responsibly and drive it out. And that's where the AI and machine learning coming to educate our people also. But let's go to Arpit. Arpit, you are our Vice President for Data Science for Khatabook.
Yeah.
If you can share that, how are you using in this education sector to help us out?
Sure. So Khatabook is basically an app. It is a digital first app for small and medium businesses, and it is transforming the way the small retailers like a Kirana shop or a medical store would do business, right? So if you understand their psyche, traditionally they have been doing business in a very traditional way with pen and paper, talking to their customers, building relationships is how they work, and transforming this to absolute digital experience, like using the app to note down how much you have to pay your suppliers or you have to receive from customers. It's in itself a habit changing thing that we have been doing for the last 2.5 years. So it would be fair to say that Khatabook cannot survive without a data culture, because we have enormous digital footprints, and it also is as an added responsibility, because if you see, not a lot of people in the country would have the digital footprints for small retailers. Only a few apps like say Khatabook, BharatPe, PhonePe, Paytm, these would have this footprint, and it becomes a responsibility to use it well. But internally, if you talk about Khatabook, there are a couple of things that that is helping us drive the data-driven culture. First is our leadership is absolutely aligned. And what I've realized is that a lot of data culture is also top-down. That if your leaders are not aligned, or how much soever your junior folks want to drive it, they won't be able to drive it after a certain extent. So a good thing about us is our CEO, all our co-founders, they are extremely data-driven, very young and very extreme data-driven guys. Second is that we have inducted this as a process of a hiring. So what I mean is that whenever we hire any senior role, there is a analytics leader who would take, say, one of the rounds and gauge whether the person is actually data centric or not. Have they taken decisions backed by data, or just generally intuition or experience driven? Right. And third is that we have a very strong experimentation culture in the company. That sometimes people would get biased by their own experiences, and they would say that, I have seen this working. in my previous organization, and I'm absolutely sure that this is how it works, right? So the way we tackle it is we say that, let's set up experiments. We are absolutely sure that you might be right, but there's no harm in doing it. And that is kind of backed by each and every stakeholder in the company. So these are kind of the three pillars that are helping us drive the data-driven culture. But on the second half, if I talk about some real use cases that we are using in Khatabook that I think good for everyone to understand is, for example, let's take marketing. Now, marketing, if you see, the main objective is how do I spend optimum amount of money to get the best quality users, or how to drive growth, right? So whether you talk about multi-touch attribution models, whether it's marketing mix models, whether it's forecasting how much organic growth or installs you would get. There's so many applications that gives you visibility of your business and tells you that how much you can expect and how much you need to, target more. If we talk about that, especially we are in financial services. So in financial services, fraud is a very, very big use case, right? And it's such a use case that you have to resolve it real time. You cannot wait for it to happen. So internally, we have made risk models for all our, financial services tools. One is payments, one is QR, where we detect in real time if a person has a high probability of being fraud, and then they go under manual review. And there are a lot of efforts that going into personalization of our apps, like which kind of features will be used, say, for a retailer versus a distributor, for a Kirana store guy versus a medical store guy, right? How should we optimize the communication, how we should optimize the loyalty programs. So I think all in all, I would say that there's a lot of efforts going on in the company, and we are still exploring these people, we're still understanding them. And hopefully we'll get there soon enough.
Thanks, Arpita. I'm really sorry. I just thought Khatabook. I didn't realize that Khata is more of a SMB. My bad on that part.
No problem.
But all of that, I think we heard that how the data culture is critical for all of us. How should we use it responsibly? And how the companies and the banks are driving towards a data-driven approach to be a company to monetize it also. But still, we are 3 times behind what the large FANG companies are. So let me come back to Kiran. Kiran, you are part of the Equifax, the financial sector. I know the BFSI is the one who will be using data for the many years now, and especially the investment sector, you are the one who are leaders driving it out, one of the leaders. So how are you using data to monetize, to profitize, to make more profit responsibly without compromising the privacy boundaries of the individuals?
Well, thank you very much. This is a very interesting question. Everybody talks about data is the new oil and all, but for us, yeah, it is oil, but at the same time, it is the soil. The more you work on it, the more benefits you reap out of that soil, right? In various, tangible formats. Having said that, I like your statement, Rajiv, when you said, all these big 4, big 5 organizations are making $8 trillion, right? So how are they making, these trillions of dollars? Which means they are monetizing each and every record that they store, right? Well, how they are doing that? It is what, how you acquire the data, how you gather the data, and ensure that what is the appetite in the market, and you project, that intelligence with the data you stored, and you are monetizing that, right? That each record for that. So all of these companies you spoke about, Google's, Facebook's, Amazon's, everybody is monetizing sheerly on data, and Equifax is no exception. As a regulatory system, all the financial institutes, they submit data to us, and we generate risk reports, credit risk reports, back to the banks for either consumer or commercial or any NBFC customer, or for people who do not have any credit history also. We generate some kind of a data, some kind of a score, and give it back to these financial institutes so that they can lend money, right? So this is how we kind of monetize the data. So how do we monetize the data? So the data is submitted to everybody. So we do have access to data all over. We do have access with the submissions of the financial institutes. We do have access to the government data. We do have access with the alternate data like telecom providers and so on. We do have access to the utilities. So by overlaying all these data, put together, we'll try to look at the trends. Hey, you know what? For example, Kiran Samudrala, has is seeking for a loan or is not seeking for a loan, but this is how he is. Now, if I look at the data, coming from electricity bill or my telephone bill or what kind of a person I am, it defines. Then there will be personal, feeding about Kiran Samudrala as to what you can sell to this customer, right? So likewise, for all the banks, commercial assets, commercial, firms, what we do is we gather the information, we share with personalized features to those, and we'll kind of, it could be a risk profiling, it could be a portfolio analysis, it could be a fraud, right? While selling all those, details with the data that we have, with all these multitudes of data layers, we're doing the analysis using ML and AI. We generate that intelligence, insights, and share with these financial institutes, and that's how you kind of make money. Like like Google's are doing money. The trends, what you can expect, going forward, is people are talking about big data and all, but going forward, I think we will start looking at small data and tiny MLs, right? Small data is something like for example, you're driving a self-serviced car or self-driving car. So the car should take decisions, in a flash of a second, right? So it cannot lean on, data going into the sensor data going onto the cloud and come back and then, give you a decision so that, you make a right turn or left time. So all the components, all these sensors, everything is embedded on the edge computing, right? You have all these sensors and the decisions will be taken over by these sensors only. So all your machine learning algorithms decides, all those things will be, written in those edge computing models and run on those things, and that decision will happen on that, and then, self-driving car will move on. So tiny and small data and tiny ML, these are something, which we can see, going forward. I was talking to somebody in the agriculture sector, and we are trying to build a use case on them, where we are looking at the kind of soil they have, right? Which state, soil and rainfall, depending on that, with the customer data that we have for that region, for that pin code, for that city, we are saying, hey, what? The repayment of the customer, if they invest in tractor loans or two-wheeler loans, will be like this. So that kind of a prediction also will happen, with edge computing going forward, right? You will have those sensors in those related areas, and edge computing is going to be very huge. And then, that going forward, the storage might happen on the cloud, but decision-making power will be on the edge, right? The second trend, I see, in the future is data-driven customer experience, right? So we looked at, again, I want to go back to Amazon example, cashless convenience stores, right? So it is the data that they gather, which is increasingly worthwhile, valuable, enjoyable experience. With that, a customer will really feel it's a frictionless, hassle-less e-commerce business that they are interfacing with all the front ends and softwares that we use. They spend less time, most customer experience and customer service contact is more. So this Amazon cashierless convenience stores, that is a concept, right? Data-driven customer. They gather the information using AI, ML, chatbots. You'll have discussions, as to what support you need in that store, and then you kind of experience a more enjoyable experience. You'll gain there. And it is very personalized. Say, you enter into the store, it says, prioritization in goods and services, based on the personalized data that they receive. Especially, in this pandemic sparked a wave of investment and innovation on retail technology. This innovation is becoming, more people just want to, kind of have that kind of an experience in every department, customer experience in every department, right? So data science, is driving that. The other one I can see is what we call as deep flakes in data science community. People who are aware of machine learning AI. What is deep flake is, if you look at it during pandemic wave 2, Tom Cruise has started posting on TikTok, and everybody was shocked. Hey, what, Tom Cruise, can he really do TikToks? But that is generated, right? It is a generative AI. That is what we call it in the industry. It is called as generative AI, and it aims at to generate or create something which is not true, right? You can have a discussion with Michael Gorbachev and Mahatma Gandhi. That is a reality. That which in reality doesn't exist, but then you can create that. So this is all. This generative AI is now, will in going forward will be embedded in the arts and entertainment industry, which we will see, going forward. And synthetic data is something, again, part of the same community, which trains. For example, we'll have all the images, lying there, and we'll train the images. Basically, we'll write algorithms, and with this synthetic faces will show, and the algorithms ML will show all the synthetic faces of people who never existed, and can be trained on facial recognition algorithms while avoiding the privacy concerns involved with using real people faces. So based on this, you can create fantastic programs in medical images, right? For example, if somebody has cancers, looking at those images of healthcare industry experts, they look at these images and they can take a decision as to what the cancer is, how to treat that, and so on. Like, for example, it can be used in an architect to produce concept of images of a building simply by describing how it looks inwards. If I say, hey, what this building should be, so features, and you'll have a picture in front of this is how it looks. You don't really have to do anything. And the last thing I want to talk about is the convergence, where AI, IoT, cloud computing, and 5G will come into picture. And these are all the cornerstones of digital transformation. Data is the fuel they all burn to create the results. So, with all these things, we'll start seeing the great automation, right? We are driving a wave of automation of creating smart homes, smart factories, all the way up to smart cities, right? So this convergence will start happening, going forward, maybe in 2022 is what I'm saying, when 5G is available. So thus, what I'm saying is, we'll have these trends evolving, in the data community in coming next 2 to 3 years.
Thanks, Kiran. I know you really gave a deep insight about it. I know, guys, the audience, you can just see how the esteemed panel have been sharing their views over the last, I would say now about 50 minutes right now. I know we can keep discussing for next few hours, but now let me help you summarize the whole thing out, keeping in mind we all are time cautious about it. So what we discussed with all of you was around data culture, how things would transform, and culture in the company is more important. Second, how should we be more responsible and accountable of using AI and machine learning so that we use the data very responsibly for our better outcomes. Third, we also discussed about how do we set up the new future data-driven banks or the pharmaceutical companies or manufacturing organizations. And fourth, we discussed that how can we really monetize. And I know it's too tough to compete with all those 4 companies, FANG companies, but we can really look at it. how they are monetizing it. And Kiran brought a very valid points of all those deep flakes, the agriculture thing theory data. We already are using it. So Kiran, that is already there. Conversion of IT/OT. We are much ahead in this game in Siemens. We already launched the 5G routers. We are using that for the IT/OT convergence, generative ads, and deep flex. So all this is very much there. So what I can really help with the closing statement to all of you. There's no blueprint for success when it comes to finding what best works for your organizations. Every company will have its own unique cases. Could be a bank, could be a pharma company, could be manufacturing, could be a Khatabook also. And workloads that may require different kind of data points, which can help transform and involve a new different channel models, new business model to drive it. What is required is we need to be open, flexible, intelligent, and build solutions that can make difference for our businesses for future success. Then going forward, Kiran brought up a new thing. Data is not only the oil, it's also new soil. How do you really put water, the manure into it can make a difference to all of us. With that, I would like to say thank you to all my panel members for a great discussions, a very healthy discussions. Thank you for your insights. I think so. Our audience would have really gathered a good knowledge from all these things. With that, I want to thank to all of you and thank to Harish and Kavya for hosting all of us in this panel discussions.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, everyone. Pretty interesting to interact.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rajiv, for that fabulous moderation. And thank you indeed to all our panelists for sharing their fabulous insights as well. I believe it was a befitting close to the entire summit, gathering your nuggets of perspectives. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, and all our attendees, we come to the end. And we do hope you've had some wonderful takeaways from all the sessions. And we hope to see you all in person for the next edition as well. Thank you very much. With that, everyone, stay safe, take care, and see you all in the next edition really soon. Thank you again.